Who's ready for my favorite part of the night? No Name Cinema Science, the classic! Woo! Yay! Partying by myself for the classic is here. We got the Grapes of Wrath, as you can see behind me. What's up? I don't know why I'm doing this with my hands. I'm trying to, stay cool somehow. Maybe fan myself off because it's hotter in LA than it usually is. Got 90+ degrees out here. So anyway, I'm very excited about tonight because tonight is our third John Ford film that we've ever talked about. We talked about Stagecoach in episode 2. We talked about The Quiet Man in episode 4. So this is our third one that we've done in our 30th classic. It's also our third film that we've talked about that came out in 1940. Last year, for its 75th anniversary, we talked about The Great Dictator in episode 12.3 and The Philadelphia Story in episode 16.3. And also from 1940, in films that we've talked about, whether in sound-offs or just that happened to come up, we talked about Pinocchio a couple times, also from 1940, episodes 12.3 and 20.3, and we talked about Kitty Foyle in episode 22.4 when we did our Trumbo Top 5. And on those of you that follow me on Twitter know that I went to see Foreign Correspondent last year, another 1940 film. I went to see it at Film Forum, and some of you tweeted me back about that. Before we introduce my co-host, let me just give you a quick update on the evening schedule here. So we started the evening with a discussion of Free State of Jones. You can find that online if you missed it, the latest Matthew McConaughey madness. Then at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, we just wrapped up our discussion of Circumstance, the 2011 indie that takes place in Iran. Right now we're just about to unpack one of the most important films of all time, I might say, The Grapes of Wrath. We screened it during my Oscar movie marathon not too long ago, and that's going to happen any second now. And then at 10 o'clock, and in just under an hour, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific, we got our Sound Off, our freeform segment, where Davey's going to have a diatribe about something or other. I'm going to do my top 5 Matthew McConaughey films, and I'm also going to talk about a film that Davey made me watch. So that's coming up. So now I'm going to introduce my buddies here who don't really like me as a person, but they like what I do for their show. So who's up first? Drunk Davey, you're up. How you doing?
Good.
He's the populist, ladies and gentlemen. And here comes our elitist, the hater, J Money. Welcome to the classic.
Greetings to all.
Yeah, and see, that's almost like a reference to our next current feature. Maybe never mind. I thought it was a Star Trek reference. Anyway, it's our 30th episode, and every time we reach the 10th and the 20th and the 30th, we do a little look back. So let's take a look at the last 10 classics that we've done, so you can see them all here. It's been quite an eclectic mix, wouldn't you guys say?
Definitely. We've had a good run of classics.
Yeah. No, of course, my favorite movie of all time is in this list, so it's pretty obvious what my favorite of the year is going to be. A favorite in this group. Do you guys have a favorite in this group?
I do, but I feel like I should save it.
Oh, okay, all right. And Davey?
I mean, it's hard to pick one, but first I would say Goodfellas.
Goodfellas. All right. Yeah. No. I mean that's in my top 20 all time. So no harm there. Let's talk trivia. The trivia that I did in the podcast last time was I hinted that this was one of the films that we did in our Oscar movie marathon. I announced the Oscar movie marathon films. I think it was episode 22.4. I think I announced them. Do you guys remember what they were?
Yes.
Aside from this.
If there's no follow-up questions, yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
That was a follow-up question. No, I don't remember.
Oh, that kind of follow-up question. All right. Well, for our audience, for the sake of our audience, we started the morning with Black Swan at 7 a.m. From 2010 because we were doing 5 years ago. We were celebrating the 2015 Oscars. So Black Swan from 2010, Brokeback Mountain then followed from 2005, Goodfellas from 1990, which we talked about in episode 27.3, and of course our 1990 review. most of you guessed that this show is going to be The Sound of Music, which was our 1965 film from the Ask Movie Marathon, and of course from 1940, The Grapes of Wrath. The other tidbit on Facebook, the clue on Facebook was that Alfred Hitchcock did direct a film to win Best Picture. It was Rebecca, and it was this year. But everyone knows that Alfred Hitchcock himself did not win an Oscar because he lost Best Director to John Ford for Grapes of Wrath. So those are your tidbits. How do you guys feel about that information?
You mean how I feel about him losing to John Ford?
No, just the fact that I had all that information.
I think it was great that you had it at the ready. You are an encyclopedic knowledge, an encyclopedia of knowledge, JB, that never ends. Like the book.
Yeah, I basically, no. This is where I need you to vamp. That was what that's all about.
There you go.
It's not your best vamping work. I'm not gonna lie to you.
You can't criticize my vamping work when I actually vamp for you.
What's that?
You can't criticize my vamping work if I actually vamp for you.
I know, but I mean, I just wish it was a little more natural. We'll float a little better. We'll have to work. Maybe we'll have a practice.
It's been a year and a half.
Ready to talk about the Grapes of Wrath? Who's ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah. All right. This is the Jode family, y'all. Yeah. See, I'm excited. The Jode family is one of many in Oklahoma whose home was foreclosed upon after the land dried up, no longer able to sustain farming. Like many families, the promise. I just had a computer issue. Okay. Like the promise of work leads them to pack up in their jalopy and head west. But once they arrive, their dream of a prosperous future gets soured by the economic realities. And so it's time to start off the discussion of the Grapes of Wrath from 1940. Opening thoughts, and J Money already hinted how he felt about it. So let's start with him.
Well, I mean, hey, it's a classic for a reason. This is a pretty good movie.
Yes.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good.
Is this you vamping?
Yes. Natural. It's only unnatural when you call out that it's vamping, JB.
Yeah. So, Davey, teach him a class on how to vamp. What are your opening thoughts?
That was good.
Oh, look at that. Not even pretty good. Just good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be really short to kind of, my vamping. But anyway, no, it was great. It was great.
So that brings me to this. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. The Dewey's quality. He says it's a good movie, so that's kind of exciting, and I'm sure John Ford in his grave is feeling really good about that.
He should be.
I think his relief is what he's feeling. His relief.
Yeah, if anything. All right. So we ended the screening. I screened it on February 27th this past year, as you guys know, for the Ask Movie Marathon. The group was mostly impressed and inspired. The conversation, for better or worse, got highly politicized, and we'll see if this one does as well. We had one actual communist in the group who liked the film, but was very passionate about the book, and was frustrated that the film was not as angry as the book. But he also operated under the assumption that Steinbeck promoted communism, which he technically did not. Although he was, sympathetic to workers and in this case the migrant workers, he did not believe in communism in general. The other aspect of the film that got a lot of attention was the cinematography, and I'm sure we'll open up into that a little bit because it might be one of the best black and white looking films ever, and it features the best black and white cinematographer ever to live, and we can talk about that. But before we do, I want to talk about direction. I think that this is not. It's very unlike a lot of John Ford's other films in many ways, and I think there's one very specific choice that he makes that stands out to me. Do you guys want to guess it, or do you just want me to go?
Don't keep us on our. Well, maybe Davy Joe wants to guess. Davy Joe.
No, I want to guess.
You do not want to guess. The documentary style with which he approached this film, like there was this very docudrama type style that Ford adopted that is really not present in a lot of his other films. That gives this film essentially a social protest film a lot of urgency. How do you guys feel about that?
I guess I'm curious to see how you want to unpack the idea of docudrama in this situation. I mean, I don't know if I got documentary style out of it.
Oh, no, you don't think so?
Well, I mean, it's not that I don't see, or it's not that I couldn't be persuaded to believe that. I guess I just didn't. That wasn't the first thing that struck me as watching it. You know.
Well, I mean, I think about the shot when they first arrive at one of the Hoovervilles.
Uh-huh.
And they basically strap the camera. I don't have a picture of it, but they basically strap the camera on the front of the truck and drive through that sort of subjective view going through the camp.
Yeah.
And also I was going to bring this up during cinematography portion, but and I think Jay Money knows where I'm going here if I can find the right photo. It's hard to tell the difference between photos like this by Dorothea Lange and this is one of the most famous photos of all time, and the cinematography of this film. I mean, it felt very, very just the images, and not necessarily the performances, but just from an image point of view, it felt very real. Like it felt very. Oh, someone wants to say hi. Does not know I'm live on camera.
They should know that.
Right? They should. So that's what I mean by docudrama. Like you could take this image from Dorothea Lange, which was a real image, and place it anywhere in this movie, and you wouldn't miss a beat. I felt it. Although John Ford did do other documentaries, like especially World War II, propaganda type stuff. This film felt very urgent, especially visually. That's what I sort of mean by documentary style. And in fairness, it is something when discussing it in classes and things, that was something very specific that we talked about. So it's not like I'm just pulling this out of my ass.
I don't know. There's so many things that come out of your ass, JB. You never know. I see your point. I mean, I now that you've kind of explained it better, I do see what you're saying.
So from a directorial point of view, before we get to that, David Joe, do you have anything about this directorial thing?
No, I didn't have any idea where you were going with that originally, but yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I also think it's unique within at least the narrative canon for John Ford. Mainly known for these westerns or some of these. We saw Quiet Man, which is sort of these fables type thing, particularly in Ireland or in Wales, in the case of How Green Was My Valley. So I think that it had an urgency to it that a lot of his other films didn't necessarily. And also, it really felt like it was uncovering the common man to some degree. You know what I mean? It really felt like it was showing a side of America that a lot of 1940s folks weren't seeing if they weren't living it,
Well, yeah, but do you, on that point, do you also think it has to do with the timing of when this movie was released? Because, it was a very fresh event. And, in fact, there were still problems with the Dust Bowl when the year it was released.
That's true. That's true. But not to get too far ahead of ourselves when it comes to the politics, but by this time, also minimum wage had been passed. By the time the book was written, it had not. No, that's not true. But when the book started, it had not. It passed in 1938. The book came out in 1939. The movie came out in 1940. But
it's a very, very short time frame, so it feels like.
No, for sure. But things were changing at the same time. Is my point.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is, do you feel like the sense of urgency that you're seeing in this is partly because he is actually filming it, as it's happening in a certain way? There's not a lot of distance between him making this movie and
That's true, but they were all actors. You know what I mean? It's not like they plucked migrant workers and stuff. They recreated this world, from scratch.
Yeah. But in terms of the direction, in terms of his directorial sense, do you feel like he personally also was? Partly because they were kind of living it in a certain way at the time.
Well, when you say they, who are you referring to? The migrant workers?
Americans in general were living through this kind of tragedy.
Yeah, but clearly John Ford wasn't, doing too badly.
John Ford was definitely not on jalopy traveling across the, But certainly as a Californian, he must have been aware of a lot of things that were happening in California, and I think that the country in general was aware of the agricultural disaster that was happening. So I guess I would say
I don't even. Yeah, it's not even just the agricultural disaster. The agricultural disaster was in the Midwest. But what I actually think this movie is more about is actually the workforce disaster and the corruption there within. But that's maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves. The other thing that I think is really strong about the movie is, from a directorial point of view, is the blocking for camera. It's almost, we talked about this in the discussion a little bit. It's how it's almost a forgotten art, and I think that's come up before. I think in our Lion and Winter discussion, I think it did. The lost art of blocking for camera, and also a lot of modern movies will overuse close-ups, and I think this movie does not. Oh, I had the wrong photo up. Sorry. I think this movie avoids close-ups up until the very end when I don't want to say they're really needed, but I mean like he saves them for really important moments. You know what I'm saying? And where's the picture I wanted? Yeah, there it is. So that's a big part of it. I think the other thing that I think is really interesting. I mean, because sometimes this film gets accused of over sentimentality, but I wonder if there is a difference between over sentimentality and honest sentiment. Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes honest sentiment is called for, and I think there are points in this movie where that's the case. I mean, namely this sort of speech in the end. It's sort of a famous speech, and for some people it gets a little saccharine, but I think it's kind of dead on and it's sort of worthy of the movie. The movie earns it, I think. Do you guys have anything on anything I've said so far?
You know, it's interesting because I think that there were definitely parts of the movie that struck me as being maybe over sentimental, but that's the speech you're referring to is definitely not one of them. That is an amazing speech. And honestly, I mean, I know we're going to get into this in a second, but like the two performances there that we're looking at, Peter Fonda or Henry Fonda and Jane Durwell are amazing. They're standout performances in this movie. And
I will half agree with you, and we'll get into that.
All right, there we go.
Shortly. Do you have anything on my comments on direction, Davey?
Yeah, you know the sentimentality. I mean, you're talking about a film that is basically about the collapse of the American way of life. So. Yeah, I mean, I think that people should maybe give it a break in that regard. That there's going to be a lot of emotion that comes through.
I really want to ask about that statement. But let's save on that. The collapse of the way of American life. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I'm talking about is you're talking about a time in our country's history where there was 50% unemployment and people were terrified about, you know, food and places to live and things like that.
And that's part of it, but I mean, like, the Dust Bowl itself was something altogether different, where just like lack of knowledge of farming made the soil no longer good and it created a chain of events. I'm sure if they weren't the Depression, they might have been able to do more about it. So I mean, like, the Depression, it's not like Depression's not a part of it, but the Dust Bowl itself, I have the sense that it was, for the most part, its own chain of events. But that's beside the point. The other thing I wanted to talk about from directorial point of view is tone. Now, do I bore you guys when I talk about direction and these directorial choices? Do you feel like it's something you can't comment on, so it's really just me?
No, I can't comment on like you because I don't direct, but you definitely should be talking about this. We need your insight on this.
Okay, all right. The tone, and this is something that I admire, but I think it keeps me from keeps the movie off my top 100. The bleakness of tone, appropriate, but at the same point, the movie's slow as a result, and it's almost like maybe what you were saying about circumstance. Like, I recognize it's important, but it's hard to be passionate about from a non-political point of view. You can be passionate about the issues, but not necessarily passionate about the movie itself. And obviously it's a movie I really like. I'm not saying I don't, but I mean, like, I'm talking about keeping it off that top echelon of the top 100. So anyway, this issue of tone. I mean, J Money's bleak in general, so maybe he really appreciated it. I mean, like, I think it's a directorial achievement to accomplish it. Like, we talk about the consistency of tone is really hard, and he nailed it. But at the same time, it's a bitter pill to swallow at times. It's like a hard movie.
Sure, I guess. I mean, it's funny because honestly, my quibble with this movie in general is almost that I think it isn't a bleak movie. I mean, in a lot of ways, I don't feel like there's a consistent tone of bleakness to this movie. I feel like in a lot of ways it jumps around in tone quite a bit, from being bleak at times to being almost comical at times because there's a lot of, I want to say, kind of caricature sort of characters in this movie that are there for comedic effect, and I found that sense disjointed and kind of weird, and that's why I said.
Well, it's funny. That's true, and those are the elements of the film that do seem Fordian. But I mean, like it never breaks that tone for me. It almost feels like he's trying to inject humor, but the humor falls flat. So it never feels like. But it never breaks from the tone because I still feel like that cloud hanging over it.
I don't know if it's because I know the source material as well, as I'm sure that we all do because we are all students of the American educational system. We probably have all read Grapes of Wrath. But
the book is 10 times darker, and I wanted to talk about the adaptation. The book is
10 times darker, so I actually kind of was expecting more darkness in this movie, and that's maybe.
Wait a minute, was this your first time watching this movie?
It was the first time watching this movie, yeah.
Holy cow! Is that true for you too, Davey?
Yes. Yes.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
Holy cow! Look at this.
Yeah.
Oh my god. And Davey, did you say you liked it? Did you have an opening statement? I have no idea. I don't remember.
Yeah, no, I did. I liked
it. All right, tell me of this bleakness of tone. Do you see where I'm coming from, Davey?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tone is pretty bleak. But I guess it
takes a lot from me.
I guess it wasn't. It could have been worse in that regard, or it could have been more bleak. So I mean, I guess they wanted people to sit through the film. They wanted people to go see the film, so they didn't want to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what about my point that it is a barrier? Like, I don't even call it a quibble because it's appropriate, but it is a barrier to loving the movie. You know what I mean?
You know what? The movie it reminded me of. I don't know if you ever saw Umberto D. It's just like
I know Umberto D. well. I did a lot of work about Italian neorealism back in the day.
And just trying to, it's just like, it's a great movie, but it's hard to sit through. Like, it's just.
Umberto D. is a lot worse in that regard. Umberto D. is poke your eyes out. This isn't that bad.
Way worse.
Have you seen Umberto D. by chance, J Money?
No, I'm really intrigued though, based on what you guys are saying. I mean, I really think
it's like perfect for J Money. It's totally his type of thing. All right, I'm going to move on to cinematography, and just for a second, we're going to appreciate one of the greatest cinematographers of all time, and we're gonna revisit him again next year. It looks like we got another classic coming up, shot by this guy. For those of you who don't know, this is shot by Greg Toland, who is probably best known for shooting Citizen Kane, which might be the best looking black and white film of all time, but Grapes of Wrath is up there. Magnificent Ambersons, also Greg Toland. He's pretty effing amazing. And in particular in this movie, another sort of step outside the world for Ford is the embrace of darkness in this movie. And this scene in particular, when Tom Joad just is getting back from prison early on, like there's a scene where he's basically lit by a candle, and this is your movie star, Henry Fonda, and they had no fear of like him not being seen, and I think it adds to the docudrama style in the sense that it takes away from the sense of artifice. You know what I mean? So that's my comment on cinematography. How did you guys feel about the cinematography?
I mean, for me personally, it was the star of watching this. I mean, the cinematography for this movie is what elevates it so much beyond just being like a good movie or a pretty good movie. This is a pretty good movie because every scene, every shot was really glowing with this wonderful sense of dark and light. I loved it. The sequence specifically, when they go into the house and it gets like progressively darker and more confined. I loved that entire sequence quite a lot. I mean, I just think it's great.
I picked a good photo for it, right?
You did, yeah, definitely.
But yeah, no, I think that's the. Most of our audience said the same thing. Like that was one of the first things that they talked about was the cinematography. Davey Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty striking throughout the film. I particularly the shot when the right after the bulldozer takes out the house, and then you can just kind of see the barren countryside. It's just.
Well, that image specifically is an amazing image. I was going to bring it up when we started talking about the the themes a little bit more. Let me see if I can find it here, and maybe oh, there it is. Because it wasn't just the bulldozer, if you remember. It started with this very striking image of their shadows on the land, and sort of connecting, cinematically connecting them to the, and not just them to the land, but their shadows to the land. So like it has this extra element of nostalgia and how important it was, but it's fading away, and so it pans up from this, it pans and tilts from this shadow shot to the bulldozer, to the house fallen, and the bulldozer fading away in the distance. I mean, like, so much going on in the single shot, way ahead of its time to some degree, and the way that Greg Toland frequently was way ahead of his time with his framing and some of his concepts.
It was a very, it's a very sophisticated sequence, and I guess I was almost surprised to see it in this movie in a certain way, just because it felt like it was kind of, almost more challenging to the audience. I guess in a lot of ways I feel like this movie was built to be kind of a little broad strokey for an audience to see it, and that to me felt like it really stuck out as a very unique element. So it was great. It was a great sequence just in general, but
Well, I mean, it's a good segue to talk about adaptation, because I mean it's a hard book to adapt because it has these sort of inner chapters within chapters.
Yeah.
And I mean, overall, I think Nunnally Johnson did a great job in paring it down, and I like there's points that in the book that didn't involve the Joad family that he inserted the Joad family into, and I thought that really worked in terms of helping the narrative move forward. But J Money, as someone who's familiar with the book, where are you in the adaptation?
Well, I guess it's funny because I went back and forth on this a lot after watching it. I think in a lot of ways, the way that they cobbled it together made it work much better as a movie in general. So I think in a lot of ways they took the source material and they were able to kind of chop it up and cut out certain characters and certain events to make a really strong narrative that worked for the movie, and to make the movie feel much more cohesive, and also ultimately to end on a much more sort of hopeful note, which I understand why they did that for a movie. I understand why it sort of became. I think it's funny. In some ways, it's like a great example of Hollywood taking maybe some darker, deeper material and then making it more palatable to American audiences on a whole. And I think that was a successful attempt at doing that. On the other hand, I mean, there's a lot of really deep things that are happening in Grapes of Wrath, the original material, and there's a lot of interesting things that didn't happen in this movie. And I don't know how much you want to maybe even touch on this later, but it's interesting because I'm sure you've seen that Spielberg is vying to remake it, to do his own version of this, and I'm really curious what.
I've not seen that.
Oh yeah, he's been in context. There was something in the news even last week about it, how Steinbeck's family keeps denying him the ability to or the rights to actually get the rights to the movie or whatever.
Would you rather M. Night Shyamalan do it?
No, it's not even that. No, that's not that. It's just that I wonder if how like a modern interpretation would handle the material now. I don't think that they would necessarily try to hide anything, and I wonder how much that would affect the overall story.
The Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago did an adaptation. You can see the sweatometer is happening here. They did an adaptation that was a little more truer to the book and ended with the breastfeeding of the stranger like the book does.
Yeah. I get why that wasn't in the movie in 1940. I mean, there's a very, it would have, yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's certainly a very striking part of the book, and it should have been in a movie adaptation at some point, if it.
Right, and Rose of Sharon in general was a lot more, was a lot bigger part of the book than she was the movie. But I mean, it did seem appropriate. I like almost to your point. I liked the choices. I liked the hardcore screenwriting choices that Nunnally Johnson made to make this work.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite scenes of the movie is not the same in the book. And this 2 for a penny scene.
Yeah.
Which is not the Joad family in the book. It's this whole other inner chapter, sort of side chapter, that I think is really powerful.
Yeah.
But I'm glad it happened to the Joad family. You know what I mean? So I think it was in terms of the culling of all the information from the book, it was an appropriate choice.
Absolutely. I think I would work under the assumption that this movie was made for people that didn't necessarily read the book to begin with. So it feels like they had to really kind of create a story around the story, And it makes a lot more sense from that point of view. You know, if you take it as something where they're using the basis of the book for a storyline, it makes a lot of sense that they put it together the way that they did, because that makes much more sense in movie setting.
Yes. All right. So believe it or not, I don't know what it is about tonight that everything's moving so fast. We're running out of time of stuff that I wanted to cover, but I mean, like, we did hint that we were going to talk about performances because we have some disagreement.
Yeah.
So, you know, here again are the two main ones, and this is one big choice. There's Rose of Sharon, who's, you know, but I mean, like, they sort of leave Rose of Sharon out to focus on Tom and Ma. And, you know, Tom Joad is a great part. And I almost think of it like Gregory Peck and Atticus Finch in the sense that it's the heroism of the character that audiences respond to. But for me, and this is true of Henry Fonda, I think, in a lot of his early work, he's never been one of my favorites. I think he's a little over the top and not as comfortable in his skin as an actor overall, let alone as Tom Joad. I mean, he looks the part for sure. And you know, and it was it's the role of a lifetime, and so he's remembered for it. And the speech is so well written, and there's so much to it. And again, it's the character in terms of symbolizing America is important, and I think that's why the performance gets remembered. But in actually evaluating acting, I'm not as on board with it. You know, like he was nominated for an Oscar and he lost to Jimmy Stewart in The Philadelphia Story, which we also talked about. But you know, if I were voting, I would have been all about our old boy Charlie Chaplin in The Great Dictator.
Yeah.
Like, I think that in that year, now that we're such experts in 1940, I mean, I think that performance in that year is the one that is the most amazing to me. And you know, like, I'm most remembered for my quibbles for that movie instead of how much I liked it. But regardless, I can't take away from Charlie Chaplin's performance, which leads you then to believe that the performance I really love is the Oscar-winning performance of Jane Darnell. She won the Oscar. She deserves it. I mean, like, you know, it's funny because she often gets reevaluated as being over the top. I think she does a lot of subtle visual moments. She has some preachy moments which are in the script, but I think she handles them admirably. But my favorite moment, couldn't find a photo of it, is when she was burning her old stuff, going through, like, it's a little bit piece that she goes through old memorabilia and burns it. Beautiful, beautiful, ahead of its time for acting. So we know you like them both. Davy Joe, am I making any sense to you about these performances?
Yeah, no, I think you are. You know, as far as Tom, yeah, I agree. Tom wasn't perfect. I mean, I can see.
If you're looking for the last name, it's Joad.
Tom Joad. Yeah. No, anyway, I just thought that I thought that maybe, I don't know, and sometimes it was a little wooden, maybe a little stiff at times, but I don't think it takes away from the film at all. But it's just, I mean, if you're talking about comparing him to Charlie Chaplin and The Dictator, I'll agree with you there. I'll go with Charlie Chaplin.
Do you agree with us at least on that point, Jim Money?
Yeah, I don't think I would have given the Oscar to Henry Fonda either. And who else was nominated? I mean, there was, like, we talked about, you know, we
talked about Charlie Chaplin. We talked about Jimmy Stewart, who wound up winning. Cary Grant, I think, was also nominated for The Philadelphia Story. And in terms of the other nominees, like, we've seen so many 1940s films, we should know it. But I don't remember the last nominee. But I mean, it was
a very strong year. It was an amazing year for film, apparently. And yeah, I don't think Henry Fonda necessarily
will be too.
I don't think Henry Fonda should have rose to the top of the list in that whole list you just described. But I do think in terms of this movie, him and Jane Durwell's performances are the ones that stand out the most to me. You know, I guess, JB, I would say that both of them actually seem over the top to me. I don't necessarily think that, you know, it's just Henry Fonda being over the top. I think they both are, but I don't think that it necessarily detracts from the overall performances that they put in there. And I also think that you're right in saying that there is a lot of subtlety to what Jane Durrell is bringing to her performance. I would say in the same way that there's things that I think Henry Fonda does as well. I think that there's sort of a quiet brokenness to him that sort of evolves while he's in this movie. He
I
starts.
love it when he's quiet. He's much better when he's quiet.
He is. He's definitely much better when he's quiet. I absolutely agree. But I think that you see him evolve from like this cocky character to becoming a much more sort of desolate, destroyed man in a way that I kind of enjoyed watching.
To answer your question from earlier, the other nominees were Laurence Olivier for Rebecca, also pretty damn good, and Raymond Massey for Abe Lincoln in Illinois. It was interesting because Henry Fonda was nominated earlier for playing young Mr. Lincoln in 1939, also directed by John Ford. Weird.
The other thing, though, is that I'm not really familiar with Henry Fonda's earlier work, so seeing him at this age was really interesting. I mean, I'm just not – that's not who I picture when I picture Henry Fonda.
Right. Well, I don't really like any Henry Fonda performance until he gets older, and then, like, 1968, Once Upon a Time in the West, I'm like, yeah, Henry Fonda, you embrace the new filmmaking. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I really enjoy. And also on Golden Pond, I think.
On Golden Pond. I mean, that's what I always think of. Yeah.
But the performance that really riled up the group at my screening, as our buzzer goes off, damn. This is a performance that really got people upset. The communist in the group was upset because they felt like, I mean, I think it was more of a characterization issue because this character was softened a little bit from the book. This is John Carradine as Casey. For those of you who aren't familiar or can't see it, but for our podcast listeners. And our audiences were really like, and he was also characterized as a little, I don't want to say, he almost comes across as mentally ill sometimes, and that's not necessarily true in the book. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be rude, J Money.
No, I think I know what you're talking about. I guess I attributed that to his alcoholism, which I think that they kind of hint at. But whatever.
No, I absolutely agree. But I mean, like, a lot of my audience that was also watching this for the first time, wasn't necessarily picking up on that, and it wasn't super clear, and he just sort of seemed spacey, and like, our communist friend that was in the group was like angry. He was like, this is the character that has to, like do X, Y, and Z, and so forth and so on, and he was really, really upset about that. All right, so we are. Before we go on, do you have anything on John Carradine, David Joe?
It seems slightly caricaturish. Okay. I liked it, but it's a stylized thing that I can see someone.
All right, so I mean, like, I think we're running out of time, but I think we'd be remiss not to at least talk about some of the larger issues involved with the Grapes of Wrath. Like, I don't want to get into political discussion, especially with Jay Money, who's also a communist. But,
I'm a nihilist. I don't know.
Yeah, and a narcissist. But here are some of the issues that we could talk about, and I don't know if one of them resonates more for the others, or if you feel like I'm missing something. If we can just have a quick sort of sense of this. I mean, like, the concept of communism versus community is something that we talked about a lot in our screening. Activism and unionization, minimum wage, migration and immigration, the concept of borders, and so forth and so on, and and the relevance of the film today. Does any of those or anything else strike you about anything that's something that you want to think that made this film make you think about or you want to talk about?
Well, I certainly think that the immigration issue is one really large one. I mean, honestly, this film right now feels incredibly relevant for a wide variety of reasons. There's a lot of talk about the disparity of wealth. There's the idea of, in this case, it's interstate sort of immigration, but we're seeing a lot of the same sentiments in terms of, like, Brexit, which just happened. We're seeing a lot of the same thing in terms of, in some ways, Syrian refugees in a larger sense. I mean, like, there's a lot of things that are still really relevant about the background of this movie that we see in the news every day here now. So,
I mean, like, do you feel like open borders are the answer, J Money?
It's too complicated to say one way or the other. I don't think you can just say yes or no to open borders. I do think that this movie makes a strong case for understanding people just as human beings. I mean, I think that this ultimately is talking about these influx of strangers in a certain way that are looking for a community and need to find their own community and are taken advantage of because of that. And I think that this movie is, in a lot of ways, it's not necessarily anti-establishment, but it is certainly not police force. But I mean, this movie is a very anti the cops movie. It's like it's not anti-government, it's anti the enforcers. and I feel like
but
that's
also pro-compassion to some degree.
This movie is definitely pro-compassion. That's absolutely true. This movie is definitely trying to encourage
But
that.
yet,
I mean, I think
yet you still liked it.
What's that?
I said it's pro-compassion, but you still liked it.
Somehow, I kind of got past that idea, and I accepted it into my heart. So,
Davy Joe, what did it make you think about?
I'm sorry, you broke out there. What was the question?
What did it make you think about?
You know, I was thinking about the reception that this movie would have gotten, and how people from kind of both sides of the political spectrum would have looked at it, and I think that I think that, you know, if you were looking at it from the right, you could kind of see it as a cautionary tale of you know, what people could kind of turn to if things are bad enough. And I think if you're looking at it from the left, you can kind of you know, see it as you know, or from the far left, I should say, like your friend at the screening, he could be kind of frustrated that it doesn't really go there. It doesn't really push that, which I kind of appreciated. Like I kind of thought it was going to be more heavy-handed, pushing that, and it really isn't. So I can see how he could have been frustrated there.
And don't forget, John Ford and David O. Selznick were. I mean, John Ford would get very conservative in his later life, a la John Wayne. And David O. Selznick was he was certainly anti-union. David O. Selznick, as a producer, though, it's frequently hard to be pro-union because they fuck up your shit a lot of times. So, but any of those issues, did any of those particular issues resonate for you, Davy Joe? Like, you know, Jay Money talked about immigration. Did anything really feel relevant for you?
Oh yeah, I mean, it certainly felt relevant. You know, I remember getting out of school in 2008 and being just terrified. I mean, I don't want to, you know, make the comparison like I was living anything compared to what they were living, but it definitely is the kind of thing that I think there's always going to be something that you can kind of point to in your life and in you know, in the news that's going to be relevant.
Okay, not really an answer, but we're going to move past it anyway and get on to the showdown! Classic movie showdown, from a very somber moment to WWF movies.
David Joe, I don't know, man. You gonna take that crap? I don't know.
What's that? Who's taking crap?
I'm riling Davy Joe up. Riling him up.
Oh. Davy Joe, do you need to be riled up?
No.
Yeah.
Classic.
Okay, yeah.
Classic.
Classic Davy Joe. All right, Davy Joe, do you want to show me how you've improved?
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Time to do the rules. Tell them how the showdown works.
All right. The seating criteria varies from bracket to bracket. Films are screened at JB-hosted events, and they need to be 15 years or older. Voters are eligible if they see both films within a 12-month period, and they must see both films in JB's presence. JB is ineligible to vote unless the vote counts. He can break ties.
Not too bad, Davey. You can take your glasses off now.
Did we not update that screen, or is that? Do I still need to do that?
Oh, was that not the proper? Was that not the proper branding?
That's the older look, but I don't know if we actually did the updated version for that yet or not.
I don't know. I might have pulled up the wrong one. I'll tell you later. Okay. In the meantime, so yeah, we've got these brackets. It's like the NCAA tournament, and these films go head to head. We had a vote on February 27th from people that attended both the Grapes of Wrath screening and also another screening of a film that we talked about in episode 27.3. Yeah, 27.3 in the Best Picture nominees bracket, I like to call it, but J Money likes to call it the Best Picture losers. Films that were nominated for Best Picture but lost. In this case, Grapes of Wrath, of course, lost to Rebecca, as I mentioned earlier, and Lion of Winter lost to Oliver! In 1968. So here we can see, I will bring up a photo of The Lion in Winter. We've talked about it at length in one of our really good episodes. I screened it, I think, in October or something, and this is a still from that. And we had, like I said, episode 27.3. The episode was probably most famous for Davy's signature comment. He felt that Lion Winner was too damn bright.
Right. You're right.
And so with that in mind,
I stand by that too.
Yeah, no, we know you do. It's on the Davy scale. And we'll what was Grapes of Wrath too bright, Davy Joe? In all seriousness, although, like I said, the vote is determined by already predetermined. These guys don't know the winners. Davy Joe, what would you vote for?
All right, so this is hard. It's basically, does the Grapes of Wrath, the way it looks, which is way better than The Lion in Winter, does it overcome?
Damn right.
Does it overcome how great the script of Lion in Winter is? And it's a close call, but I'm going to go with Lion in Winter. That the script and the performances are so superior that it edges it out.
J Money.
I mean, it's amazing, but Davy Joe and I are pretty much simpatico on this one. I would say that's almost exactly my reasoning as well.
And I mean, if you watched episode 27.3, you know that Lion in Winter is in my top 20. I think it might be number 20 actually in my all-time top 100 favorite films of all time. And Grapes of Wrath, as much as I admire it, did not crack. That's the word I'm looking for. The top 100. And so, with that, we will now reveal the winner based on the. So all three of us are in agreement. Lion in Winter. The group that voted, Grapes of Wrath was the winner. And I mean, like, the politics, I think, would put it over the top. Like in the sense that, you know, like the sense that the film was potentially more important somehow. So that was the reason for that.
Yeah.
You guys are upset.
No, I'm fine. It was a close call, and I see that point. So I don't agree with it, but I can live with it. There've been worse calls in this before.
Like what, for example?
I don't know. It's some. If you jog my memory, I'm sure something. There've been a few times when I've been just.
I was hoping one would stick out for you, but I don't remember one that you were particularly upset about. I remember you getting excited when Purple Rain beat Oklahoma.
It's too soon.
I remember when J Money was upset when Pinocchio, another one of our 1940 films, was a winner. Now, we maybe have 1 minute left. Before we do you guys, now all those films from 1940 that we talked about, I can go back and take a look at remind you guys, between The Great Dictator, The Philadelphia Story, Pinocchio, Kitty Foyle, Foreign Correspondent, those are the films that have come up in the past. Obviously, now we've talked about The Grapes of Wrath. You may have seen Rebecca in the past, or Abe Lincoln, Illinois. Some other films include The Letter, Our Town, The Westerner, I think, All This in Heaven, Primrose Path. Just a sampling of 1940 films. Where, out of what you've known, what you've seen, what stands out of you? Grapes of Wrath won Best Supporting Actress, Best Director. Is that deserved, or, I mean, like, we agreed on Charlie Chaplin as Best Actor. Like, where's the Grapes of Wrath ranking amongst these films, all from 1940? Oh, Pinocchio is, of course, the other one. Did I say that already? I might have already said that.
Yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, we're talking about a lot of movies that I haven't seen everything you just mentioned, but of the ones I have seen, I guess that I would say that I would probably put Grapes of Wrath as a movie above, like, The Philadelphia Story for me. I'd put it below Rebecca. I'd put it below The Great Dictator. I'd put it below a couple other things I think that you talked about, but it's in the spectrum. It's in the spectrum of things that I appreciate and respect. But it's good that it's a good year. You know, it's fun. It's a good year.
There's
a lot of good things to unpack from that year. It's just that I personally didn't necessarily like it like on a personal level as much as some of the other ones that you're mentioning here.
Right. Davy Joe, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen all those movies either. I would say that I think this is the best film of the ones that I've seen.
Okay. So you've not seen Rebecca then?
I have not seen Rebecca. I need to see Rebecca.
I'm with J Money. I think that's the one, and it did win Best Picture, so I think that's appropriate.
Great movie.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe it'll come up. Who knows? One of these shows. Okay, I'm gonna wrap things up now, guys. I hope everybody's excited about that because we got one more. Nice flying by, don't you guys think?
Oh yeah, excellent.
Our next classic is considered one of the biggest busts in movie history, and we're going to break that down on our next classic discussion, which is in July 28th, I believe, at 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. But next up, in about 10 minutes, maybe 7, if we get everything done, is our sound off, which is our freeform segment. We're just going to shoot the shite, as it were. Davy's got a diatribe. And J Money has J Money doesn't have anything. There's a second run where I am forced to watch a movie that Davey recommended, and the part you're all excited about is McConaughey Mania, where I talk about the top 5 Matthew McConaughey films that I've seen, and that's coming up in our sound off. And I just want to we've had viewers all night long. I'm really excited. Thank you guys, whoever you are, watching me in my New York Knights hat, and I know you care about me and not about these guys as much, so that's doubly important to me, whoever you are. So these guys and I all thank you. Oh, look at that face, he's so cute.
Yeah,
all right, guys, so stay tuned. Look on Facebook, look for the link. We'll be back in about 6 minutes. Sound off, freeform, coming up next.